That's right. That's right. I think I'm finally live. Have no idea if I am. Kind of crazy. Not sure this is really working right now. Can't really tell if the mic's picking me up or not. So we're going to try to solve this problem. All right. So if I've learned one thing already, it's there's a little bit of a delay, but that's okay. What's going on? This is the first ever Word of Josh, Monday Night Josh, as I like to call it, live on Facebook. Recording, gonna podcast, bring it all back. So let's see. For anyone who's ever listened to me before, started the Word of Josh podcast back in 2016. It was about 3 weeks before the Trump-Clinton election, and did it off and on for a couple years. Originally, the goal was to do it once a week. Things were a little bit different as far as podcasting and how I was recording. And now through COVID, I've kind of figured out a good way to do it. So I do want to welcome everyone to the first ever episode of Monday Night Josh. And it's a whole new experience for me. It's a little bit different. Even though I'm live on Facebook tonight, I can't really see comments as I'm going on here. So anything that's crazy or questions or whatever, I may not see them till later. I gotta figure that piece out, but don't want to waste too much time with intros. If anyone's watching, chances are you know me. But thanks for tuning in. Like I said, it's my first ever Facebook Live podcast and super excited to be doing this. Calling it Monday Night Josh. Well, why am I doing that? How egotistical can I be? Well, pretty simple, really. Monday Night Football is over. For the 2020 season. It's now January 4th, 2021. We'll have a national title game next week, but by and large, Monday Night Football's done. The playoffs start this Saturday. So what better way to get your football fix on a Monday night than to hang out with me for a little bit? And this is probably my second favorite off-season day in the National Football League. Now, yeah, the playoffs are still going on, but there's 14 teams in the playoffs, which means there's 18 teams who are done for the year. And those 18 teams are home and they have jobs have already been lost. It's kind of crazy. There's a lot going on. So we're going to cover all that. But the first thing I do want to do is kind of talk about what happened yesterday leading into the playoffs and getting us ready through week 17. And, originally, since I'm in Baltimore, a pretty big Ravens fan, was going to lead off with that, but instead going to start off with the NFC least or the NFC East. Sorry, I've been calling it the least for a long time because let's face it, when the team that was going to win that division is either 7-9 or 6-10, there's absolutely nothing to be proud about. Okay, fine, you won the division championship, good job. Yes, you're going to the playoffs, but let's be realistic. Winning the division at 7-9 or 6-10, heck, at one point, 2 weeks ago, it looked like it could be 5-11. There's not that much to be proud of. And then to make things even crazier, check this out. I mean, you've probably heard what happened yesterday. So the way yesterday was working was if the Washington football team, I still can't stop saying Washington Redskins. If the Washington football team won the game, they clinched the NFC East and are in the playoffs. So there was an afternoon game at 1 o'clock between the Dallas Cowboys and the New York Giants. And the way things were working out was whoever won that game, if the Philadelphia Eagles could defeat the Washington football team, then the winner of the Giants-Cowboys game would become the NFC East champions. There'd be a three-way tie, there'd be a two-way tie if the Cowboys won. And then, if the Cowboys won and the Eagles won, then the Cowboys would have won the division outright at 7-9. Instead, the Giants won at 6-10. The Cowboys were then 6-10, and had Washington lost, they would have also been 6-10. There would have been a three-way tie, and the way it worked out is the Giants would have won the NFC East with a 4-2 division record because they swept Washington and they split with the Eagles and Cowboys. So that's how that was going to work out. Giants played I guess you could say they played really well. For them, what is really well anyway? It wasn't pretty in 2020. I'll get to that in a second. But they jumped out to an early lead. They were up 20-6, and eventually won the game 23-19. Giants defense really played well and played well most of the season. The downside for them is they lost Saquon Barkley in week 2. And once Barkley was out, it was already a tough year for the Giants anyway. Brand new head coach. They've been miserable for the last few years. Eli Manning had retired, got a second-year quarterback who's kind of a quarterback. He's not the greatest. Is he worthy of the number 6 overall pick in the draft? Well, after 2 years, no. But there's a lot of quarterbacks who after 2 years aren't what they turn out to be after year 2. Not everyone is Patrick Mahomes or Lamar Jackson winning the MVP in year 2. So the Giants were struggling. They had Jason Garrett as their offensive coordinator. Their offensive line was a mess. They had no offseason, no offseason practices, no offseason workouts because of COVID. And, if you watch the Giants play, you could see their defense pretty early on wasn't terrible. Even week 1 against the Steelers. The scoreboard didn't indicate it, but I thought their defense played pretty well. But again, for a new team with some younger players and some free agents, it wasn't there. But at the end of the day, they played well down the stretch. For a team that started off 1-7 to finish 6-10, well, you do the math. They finished 5-3 after a 1-7 start. So overall, they got better, which is what you want to do and what you want to see from a football team. And that's, how things should go. But at the end of the day, they were 6-10. So what happened in that Washington-Philadelphia game? Well, the game was, for lack of a better words, it was terrible. I mean, it really looked like a preseason game. At different points, it felt like neither team wanted to win, but nothing showed that to me more than what the Philadelphia Eagles did in the second half. Now, at one point, they're down 17-14. They get the ball down into the red zone. They wind up with 1st and goal, 2nd and goal, 3rd and goal. They don't get in, and at 4th and goal from the 4, they're down 17-14, and Doug Peterson makes the decision to go for it. Now, on one hand, I can understand that. You're not going to the playoffs. You're playing a rookie quarterback. He's having his ups and downs. I think he had only completed passes for 34 yards at that point. So maybe it makes sense. You're in there, go for the win then. But they could have kicked the field goal and tied. It was still pretty early it was still in the third quarter. But they went for it. Jalen Hurts throws a terrible pass that comes up way short. It almost looked like a one-hopper. Terrible pass, incomplete, turnover on downs, Washington's ball. And then everything really started to get crazy. Doug Peterson pulled out Jalen Hurts, put in Nate Sutterfield, or however he pronounces his name, their third-string quarterback at this point. And the way Doug Peterson was coaching that game, I don't care what he said after the game, he was not coaching, he was not playing to win. If he was playing to win anything, he was playing to win a draft pick, because the decisions he made, not challenging what looked to be, a clear fumble, not kicking the field goal to go for the tie, taking the points, trying to win, there's no doubt about it. Doug Peterson was not trying to win the football game. At that point, a decision had been made somewhere within the organization to basically say, all right, if we're going for the draft pick. They pulled out Jalen Hurts. They didn't dress Carson Wentz. So they put in a guy who's their third string quarterback, who's going to be a free agent, and use the excuse of, well, we wanted to see what we have there. He's your third string quarterback. He's going to be a free agent. You got a guy who you spent a second-round pick on who started 3 or 4 games. Why don't you give him the opportunity to actually learn how to win a ball game? I go back to 2004 when Eli Manning was a rookie and brought the Giants back against the Cowboys for his first ever win. You build off that stuff. Instead, Doug Peterson's acting like Jalen Hurts, the MVP of the league already, and pulls him out of the game. Now, I've heard Eagles fans saying, well, hey, they're getting a better draft spot. This is good. You know what? Bull. Whoever they benched coming into the game, fine. They didn't play Fletcher Cox. They didn't play Deshaun Jackson. I get it. There were no playoff implications, and that's fine. You don't want to play those guys. I get that. That makes sense. I'm not going to argue that, but whoever you do decide to dress and do decide to play, as a football coach, You owe it to your players to go out there and try to win the ball game. And I loved hearing what Travis Kelce had to say, or Jason Kelce had to say after the game. Sorry. I get the Kelce boys mixed up all the time. But I loved hearing what he had to say because you could tell he was pissed off. And he was pissed off that they didn't try to win the ball game. And that's a real problem. How do you as a coach ever look at your team again and say, you need to give me your all. You need to give me your best. I expect your best. I demand your best. How do you do that now, Doug Peterson? Because you clearly didn't put any of those guys who after 15, 16, 17 weeks were hurting, are playing for their careers, playing for their jobs, and you didn't put those wide receivers in the best position to earn jobs, earn contracts, earn dollars, earn incentives. You didn't do what was best for your team, your players. Maybe you did what's best for the future of your franchise, which is a draft pick. But you may as well, in my opinion, have looked at all those players in the face and said, guys, I really don't care about you. That's just how I feel. Now, you could say, hey, Josh, we all know you're a Giants fan too, and you're just sour grapes that the Giants didn't make the playoffs. You know what? Bull. Because here's the deal. Here's what I said, and I even tweeted it to Golden Tate last night when he was tweeting how the Eagles clearly don't like them. You know what? If you don't want your playoff hopes to come down to the hands of a division rival, then maybe do better than 6-10. Okay? You don't get any sympathy from me. And as a fan of the New York Giants, I've always watched them. I've always loved them. I don't have any sympathy. You go 6-10, you don't deserve tears for not making the playoffs. You don't deserve people to be pissed off for you. But where I am pissed off is for what Doug Peterson did to his team, to his players. And I guarantee you, when Doug Peterson is fired, and I do think it'll happen next year, it all started on January 3rd, 2021, because those players will never respect him the same again for anyone who's still on that team next year. And it's going to be a lot of guys because right now the Eagles are like $70 million over the salary cap next year. So that's what happened in the NFC East. Congratulations to the Washington football team. Hey, Ron Rivera, Alex Smith, how could you not be excited for guys like that and their stories and what they've been through? Alex Smith, who had, 18 surgeries, almost had his leg amputated, could have died, not only making it back onto the field, but starting and starting effectively. Did he light it up? No, but the fact that he got out there and guided his team to wins, and ultimately they won the division championship ultimately because he took over as the starting quarterback. And Ron Rivera, who's battled cancer throughout the years, congratulations to the entire team, except for the owner, Dan Snyder. You don't get any congratulations from me. But for the coaches, the players, good for them. And we'll see what happens in Tampa Bay. Do I think they'll beat the Bucs? No, but who knows? We'll see what happens. So there's that. That's how we're getting this started. Hey, one thing I do want to add. Back in 2007, when the New England Patriots were 15-0, they had a Week 17 game against the New York Giants, and the Giants had clinched their playoff berth and the number 5 seed the week before. So Week 17 meant nothing to Tom Coughlin's Giants. And I remember vividly, people asked Tom Coughlin, "Hey, are you going to play your starters?" Because people were really buying into the hype of the Patriots going 16-0. En route to possibly going 19-0 and winning the Super Bowl. And Tom Coughlin said to the media, how could I ever ask my players to play hard for me and tell them I need their best all the time if I'm going to then turn around and say, we're not going to give our best as a team? How could they ever believe in me? And kudos to Tom Coughlin for that. John Madden actually called Tom Coughlin after that game. The Giants lost, I think it was like 38-35, but it was a great game. It helped give the Giants a lot of momentum, and ultimately probably was the catalyst for them winning Super Bowl 42, and instead of the Patriots being 19-0, they turned out to be 18-1. So kudos to Coach Coughlin for that decision 13 years ago. And Doug Peterson, I could care less that you won I don't care that you won a Super Bowl anymore. You've pretty much ruined your legacy as a coach for the stunt you pulled last night, basically telling your players, I quit. and I'm not going to try to win. Just how it is, how I feel. All right, so Baltimore Ravens. I'm in Baltimore. Huge Ravens fans too. Boy, what a turnaround. It really looked bad the week of Thanksgiving. The Ravens wound up with 23 players on the COVID list. Just a massive COVID outbreak. The game wound up, instead of being played on Thanksgiving Thursday, got played on the following Wednesday. It was December the 2nd, I believe. The Ravens lost that game with almost all of those players still on the COVID list. RG3 was the starting quarterback. Lamar Jackson didn't play. Mark Ingram didn't play. J.K. Dobbins didn't play. Both of their first and second string centers didn't play. They had a guy snapping the ball from the practice squad. 23 guys on the COVID list. The Ravens hung with Pittsburgh. The Steelers ultimately won that game, but I remember Mike Tomlin saying after the game, I'm not happy with how we played, and this is not a victory we're overly proud of. And it kind of was the catalyst for how the Steelers played the rest of the season. They started 11-0, finished 1-4 down the stretch. We'll see what happens with them, but the Ravens yesterday came out and did to a Bengals team what they needed to do. This is not what happened during the Joe Flacco years, where there were games where, and not a knock on Joe Flacco because I'm a big Joe Flacco fan, but the Ravens came out yesterday, and when I say they pounded the Bengals into the ground, it's an understatement. When you have over 525 yards of offense in a game, en route to a 38-3 victory, and 404 yards rushing. Think about that. 404 yards rushing, 54 rushing attempts, 404 yards. That's about 7.5 yards per attempt on the ground. And not only that, but then your defense holds the Bengals, who are getting crushed, to 38 yards passing, 6 completions. A.J. Green, and possibly what's his last game ever for the Bengals, 0 catches on 6 targets. The Ravens defense, they didn't even sack the quarterback a lot, but they made it tough. They shut down the run game. They dominated time of possession. It was ridiculous. I think they had time of possession more than 21 minutes. That never happens. I mean, they must have had the ball for, I don't have the stats in front of me, but I know in the first half they had the ball for 22 minutes. It was insane, and that's what a good football team does to an inferior opponent, and that's not a knock on the Bengals, but that's where they are this year. I mean, they finished the year 4-10-1. 4-11-1. They're not a good football team. Yes, they're banged up. They didn't have Joe Burrow there. They were missing some guys, so I get that, but teams are missing guys all year. So the Ravens did what they had to do. They now go into a playoff battle against the Tennessee Titans. It's going to be it's a tough football game because Derrick Henry is just a beast. The man put up 250 yards rushing yesterday to help his team win the AFC South Championship. And the Ravens will travel to Tennessee this week. People are talking about how, it's a revenge game because of what happened last year. There's too many guys from last year's team who aren't here. Yeah, sure, it's revenge. It sounds good. It sounds fun, but what happened last year? Who cares? Last year's over and done with. Is it a revenge game from this season? Sure, that I'll buy. The Ravens choked a 21-10 lead away earlier this year to the Titans and wound up losing in overtime. This week, the Ravens will have a couple of guys back who they didn't have when they played the Titans. Brandon Williams didn't play. Calais Campbell didn't play, so they'll have those guys back. They'll have, Lamar Jackson, who's been unreal since returning from the COVID list. He's looked like the MVP that he was last year. He's looking healthier than he was during the first 11 or 12 weeks of the season, and it's going to be a great game. These are two football teams that really don't like each other. I don't think the coaches like each other, and I do think that this is going to be an exciting game Sunday at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Really excited to see what happens. I'm not really into making predictions because I'm superstitious, but I think it's going to be a great football game. I think, the Titans have these two huge wide receivers in Corey Davis and A.J. Brown and Tannehill. While a lot of people constantly talk down about him, at the end of the day, he's helping that team win, and he makes big plays when he needs to. Just look at what happened last night. And I get it, the Texans defense is not the Ravens defense, and the Ravens have a pretty good defense, but they have flaws, folks. And if you think, if you're a big Ravens fan like I am and think that the Ravens are going to walk in there and just win without a problem, it's going to be a war. And the Ravens have to prove that they can stop Derrick Henry, and no one's really done that. The man rushed for over 2,000 yards this year. He needed 230 some yards yesterday to get over 2,000, and he wound up with 250. So the man is the best running back in the NFL right now. Should be a great game, should be exciting, and really a great. The playoffs this weekend really look like a lot of fun. They really look like a lot of fun, and I don't think there are any gimme games anywhere. Okay. I've heard people say things, but let's just do a quick rundown and bear with me. I'm going to pull up the calendar on my phone. So Saturday, we've got the Colts and Bills, and I get it. The Bills are playing lights out football all world. But if you think the Indianapolis Colts can't beat them, you're in for a rude awakening. The Colts are a good football team. If their offensive and defensive lines are healthy, they can beat anybody. So I think it'll be a Bills blowout? No. Do I think the Bills will win? Yes. But if the Colts win, I'm not going to be surprised. You got the Rams, Seahawks Saturday after that. Whatever. The Rams have kind of been disappointing down the stretch. I think the Seahawks will take that. Then you got the Bucks and the Washington football team. And listen to this, folks. This is the first ever time Tom Brady is a wild card road team in the playoffs. So think about that for a second. Think about all those years Tom Brady has played in the NFL and played in playoff games. This is his first ever road wild card game, and he's been in the league now for 21 seasons. That's astounding when you consider how many trips he's had to the playoffs. First ever road wild card game for Tom Brady in year 21. Kudos. Now, Sunday, you got the Ravens, Titans, already covered that. You got the Chicago Bears, who snuck into the playoffs against the New Orleans Saints. As long as New Orleans running backs are in the game, I think New Orleans takes this game, but the Bears' defense is no joke. I just think their offense is, and if David Montgomery isn't 100%, I'm sorry, I'm not a Mitch Trubisky believer. I don't believe the Bears can do it, even if they're fully healthy. If it's mano a mano, the Saints are going to take that and take it by a lot. And then the game that has the most intrigue to me Sunday night is the Cleveland Browns and the Pittsburgh Steelers. And the Browns have had it really crazy over the last couple of weeks. Last week, they lost a game to the Jets. Basically, their top four wide receivers all wound up on the COVID list. Jarvis Landry was out. Peoples Jones was out. I still think he should change his name to People's Choice. Plus, obviously, Odell Beckham's been out for about 10 weeks. He's done for the year. So the Browns were light last week, and Baker Mayfield struggled without weapons, and I think that tells you something about Mayfield. He's probably similar to Joe Flacco. He's going to need a good line. He's going to need a good running game. He'll need good receivers, but you give him that, he's going to win you a lot of football games, and that's really what Baker Mayfield has done since he's become the Browns starting quarterback. And something is not right with the Steelers. They just don't look right. Now, I'm going to take yesterday's game out of it because they didn't play Ben Roethlisberger. They didn't play, TJ Watt. They didn't play a bunch of different guys on their defense. But, okay, when those guys were playing for the last few weeks, they didn't look very good then either. So they've struggled. They've literally rushed for 1,300 yards of rushing all season through 17 weeks of the season. The Ravens rushed for 1,300 yards over the last 5 games. The Ravens had more rushing yards yesterday, 404 yards of rushing than the Steelers had from Halloween until the day before Christmas. So almost over 2 months, the Ravens rushed for more yards yesterday than the Steelers did. So I'm very intrigued by this Steelers-Browns game. It's the Browns' first playoff game in 18 years. I think it's going to be crazy. There's not really a home field advantage this year for anybody, even the teams that are allowing a few fans in. I think the Bills will have 6,700 fans. The Steelers might. I don't know what Pennsylvania's doing. The Chiefs will have some, but there's no real home field advantage this year other than you have to travel. And I don't think that matters to these guys as much as everyone else does. Can the crowd make a factor? Yes, but with very little or no crowd, do I think there's a legit home field advantage for anybody? No, I don't. And that's why this Browns-Steelers game is going to be something special, folks. These are teams who don't like each other. There's stories there. They're good to great football players all over the place. And it's going to be a great football game. I think it's a pick 'em to me. I'm not a gambler. I don't bet. I don't do any of that stuff. But if you think that the Browns can't go in and win that game, you're crazy. Conversely, if you think the Steelers can't turn around and wipe the Browns right out of the playoffs as quickly as they got in, you're crazy. It's going to be an amazing, amazing weekend, particularly in the AFC. These AFC games, I am so excited about. The Colts and the Titans, the Colts and the Bills, they're going to be great football games. 12-4, 11-5. These are good football teams. The Ravens 11-5, the Titans 11-5, the Browns 11-5, the Steelers 12-4. These are good football teams, and none of them are even close to the Kansas City Chiefs, but it doesn't mean they can't beat them, because all you got to do is get hot at the right time in the NFL playoffs and anything can happen. Do I think ultimately the Kansas City Chiefs get back to the Super Bowl for the AFC? Absolutely. Won't be surprised if they don't. You just got to get hot at the right time. And this is going to be an exciting weekend. For the AFC, these football games should be outstanding. I'm going to be disappointed if any of them are blowouts and boring. I cannot wait to watch these three games. The NFC games will be all right, but it's hard to get excited about the Saints and the Bears. Okay, it's hard for me to get excited about the Bucs and the Washington football team. So, and then the Rams and the Seahawks, that's hard to get excited for too, because I don't think the Rams are playing good football. I don't think Washington has a chance, and I really don't think Chicago has a chance, whereas any team that wins in the AFC, I think if they win, I'm not going to be surprised. Do I think the Bills, would the Colts winning surprise me? A little, because of how hot the Bills were playing, but anything can happen in the playoffs. And the Colts are a good football team. They got a lot of good football players. They got a great offensive line, and if everyone's healthy, they're going to be able to put some points on the board. They're going to be able to move the football. Will Phillip Rivers be able to deliver in the playoffs? Well, he doesn't always do that, so who knows? But that's the difference between the AFC and the NFC. Think of it this way. In the AFC, the worst record in the playoffs is 11-5. In the NFC, you've got a division champion that's 7-9, and you got a wild card team that's 8-8. It's not even close. So there is so much that's going to happen. It's going to be great. All right, so we've talked about the playoffs. Now let's talk about my other favorite topic, which is referred to in the world of the NFL as Black Monday. It's the day after the season ends, and it's the day when coaches start to get fired and cut. And, unfortunately, they lose their jobs. These are, you have fans who want coaches out of there because they want their team to get better. And I get it, they make a lot of money, so it's hard to have sympathy for someone who's getting fired, who just made $5 million. But these are men, these are men, and nowadays they're coaching. There's women who are in the assistant coaching ranks, and we're only but a few years away from the first woman NFL head coach. I'm convinced and excited to see that when it happens. I would love to say it's this year, but I'm not sure there's a candidate out there yet. But, when you hope for a coach to get fired, you got to remember the impact that it's having. That's their livelihood. It's how they make their living. They have families. A lot of them have children. So, when you're celebrating their demise, just remember it doesn't feel good for anyone to get fired. A lot of them get paid on their way out the door, so at least that softens the blow. But it still happens. So what's happened today? Well, the Jets fired Adam Gase. They actually did that last night. The Chargers let go of Anthony Lynn. That happened this morning. The Jacksonville Jaguars fired Doug Marrone. So those were the three changes that happened today. But then there are already coaches who were fired during the season. Bill O'Brien was the first to go, fired by the Houston Texans. He was also their GM. So mid-season, they fired their head coach. I'm assuming interim head coach Romeo Crennel will not be asked back to take on the job full-time. He might retire. In Atlanta, they already fired Dan Quinn several weeks ago and also fired their general manager, Thomas Dimitroff. So they're also looking for a new GM. The Detroit Lions fired Matt Patricia a few weeks ago as head coach, also fired GM Bob Quinn. So they're looking, there you have three teams looking for GMs and head coaches. And then you have the Jacksonville Jaguars, also fired their GM, Dave Caldwell, also fired head coach Doug Marrone today. I believe I already said that, right? Yeah, I did. So Doug Marrone's out. They also are looking for a GM. The Carolina Panthers fired their general manager, Marty Herney, so he's out. That's a lot of stuff that happened in one day. So, that's already like 7 jobs, and there's a lot of people out there who are good coaching candidates. And what's going to happen? Started with the Jets. Adam Gase, first of all, and again, not to kick someone when he's down, he had no business getting that job in the first place. There were better candidates. Or at the very least, there were equal candidates, but who hadn't had an opportunity. Adam Gase was a failure for his 4 years in Miami. Couldn't win with Ryan Tannehill. As soon as Ryan Tannehill gets away from Adam Gase as his coach, Ryan Tannehill just keeps winning. So Gase gets fired. Sam Darnold's got to be relieved, but who knows if Darnold will even stay with the Jets. The Jets may trade him, and it just depends what type of coach is Jets general manager Joe Douglas going to hire. There's talk of Wink Martindale, Giants defensive coordinator Patrick Graham. The Jets have requested an interview with him. Who do the Jets go to? I would imagine maybe an offensive coach or someone with a strong offensive background, because they're either going to have Sam Darnold or they're probably going to use the second overall pick in the draft to draft the new franchise quarterback. So who knows what they'll do? The Chargers fired Anthony Lynn today. It's a real shame. The man went 12-4. 2 years ago, won a first round, a wild card game against the Ravens in the playoffs. Last year, not so good. This year, not so good. Now he's out. So the question is, who will take over for the Chargers? Now, the hot name is Bills offensive coordinator Brian Daboll. He apparently went to high school with Bills general manager Tom Telescope, and I believe Jason Lockenfora broke that news earlier. But now there's also rumors that Jason Garrett, the Giants offensive coordinator, is a target of the Chargers. So we're going to have to see where that happens. They do have a general manager in place. The Jets have a general manager in place. So they don't really have to worry about competing with these. I mean, they do have to worry about competing with teams who have general manager and head coaching jobs open, because teams may say, I'm going to hire the head coach first and the GM later, depending upon their organizational structure. But I think for the Jets and the Chargers, they're in the best position because they already have their front office set. They have the people in charge who are going to be there for a while. And the Chargers has to be a dream job. First of all, you're in Southern California and you have a franchise quarterback in Joey Herbert. So Herbert is a legit franchise quarterback, and I think he's going to do great things. So I think that's going to be a dream job for a lot of head coaches. The Jacksonville Jaguars, they fired Doug Marrone. They're without Dave Caldwell. But then Shah Khan, their owner today, basically comes out and says, I'm going to retain roster control for whoever I hire as GM, and people are going to need to know that. So, all right, we'll see how that works out. We'll see what happens with that, but I don't think it's going to be a good thing for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, rumor has it they're very interested in Urban Meyer. Lord knows the owner is worth about $8 billion, so paying Urban Meyer the $12 million a year that he apparently wants for an NFL job, not going to be much of a problem for him. That's like pocket money for him. And so but the big name college coach in the NFL does not always work out. Matt Rule's first year with the it's interesting. A lot of Giants fans wanted Matt Rule last year to be their head coach. You can make an argument the Giants had a better first year with Joe Judge as head coach than Matt Rule did in Carolina, and there were elements that felt like Rule had a better situation in Carolina. I get it. Christian McCaffrey missed some time this year, but who knows? Those big-name college coaches don't always work out. So a lot of good coaches out there. Again, I mentioned Wink Martindale should be a person. Patrick Graham, another really good defensive coordinator who should get a shot. You're going to hear more about the offensive coaches. That's just the way it rolls. You'll hear about retreads. Obviously, Josh McDaniels is a big name. There's rumors he would be interested in the Charger job because of Herbert as quarterback. But there's also rumors that he's Bill Belichick's heir apparent, and maybe he just won't leave until that job becomes his. Who knows? Eric Bieniemy, he's been the Chiefs head coach for the offensive coordinator. Bieniemy really does deserve a shot. The question is, will he get it? He did have some criminal charges brought against him when he was significantly younger and has been out of trouble, as far as I know, for a long time. I'm going to apologize in advance. I haven't done a ton of research on him, but all I know is he's been a very effective football coach in the NFL and really deserves a shot based on his body of work. And I really want to see him get a head coaching job. I think there's rumors that the Texans are interested in him. I'd love to see what he could do with a Deshaun Watson, having learned and studied under Andy Reid and learned and see how Andy Reid has built an offense around Patrick Mahomes. A lot of great things that can happen there. So really exciting. Again, the Jets have an opening. The Chargers have an opening. The Jags have an opening. The Texans, obviously, I just mentioned. Atlanta, who knows what they're going to do? Who knows what they're going to do? They had Dan Quinn. He was the defensive guy. He's been there for the last several years. That the team never really recovered from blowing the 28-3 lead to the Patriots in Super Bowl, 51, 52 a few years ago. They never recovered. And I think it's good for Atlanta to move on from Thomas Dimitroff and move on from Dan Quinn. There are some college coaches, Matt Campbell from Iowa State, a real up-and-comer, considered a real offensive-minded coach. I'd be curious to see if Arthur Blank would go that direction with the young, unproven NFL coach, but the very proven college coach. It's going to be interesting to see what Atlanta does. The Detroit Lions, I've heard rumors Jim Harbaugh could wind up there. I doubt it. I don't see why you'd want to be the head coach of the Detroit Lions, a franchise who's snake-bitten. Unless you're, Jim Harbaugh and think, well, number one, I'm not in the AFC, so I only have to play my brother once every 4 years. But two, no one's won here. So can I come in and win here? And I think that could be an interesting opportunity for Jim Harbaugh if he wants that. But there's rumors there's a 5-year contract on the table for him at Michigan. So hard to tell what's going to happen there because, again, they fired their GM. So who are the GM candidates? Yeah, there was a rumor yesterday that the Texans wanted to hire Ozzie Newsome. And then very quickly it came out that Ozzie Newsome is not interested in the job. Or is not a candidate, I should say. And I'm real curious as to who leaked that out there. Was it the Texans because they know they're not going to get Ozzie, or was it Ozzie's people because Ozzie has no interest in leaving the Ravens? Is my thought. I think he and Eric DeCosta are very close. I think Ozzie's got a great situation. He's a king. His legacy is in place. He's making a fortune, and he's getting to do what he loves, which is scout. And if you really look at what the Ravens have done over the period of time since 1996, since Ozzie Newsome became in charge of player personnel, they did great things. And then look at what Ozzie did in his last year as GM and what they've been doing since. I think it's going to take a hell of a lot to get Ozzie Newsome to leave the situation that he's in Baltimore. Can it happen? Absolutely. Opportunity talks, money talks, people who crave opportunities will, in fact, do that. And I think Ozzie Newsome could leave Baltimore. Will he? I don't know. Would it shock me if he did? No, nothing surprises me. This is the NFL. But I don't think it's happening. Dave Caldwell, GM of the Jaguars, I don't see him getting another opportunity. I think he'll have to go back into some sort of player personnel role. There's rumors Marty Hurney will leave. Obviously he was let go by Carolina. There's rumors he'll wind up in Washington in some sort of structure where Rivera probably has final say. Or maybe Marty Hurney and Rivera ultimately both report up to Templeton, Dan Snyder. I always call him Templeton because he looks like Templeton the rat from the Charlotte's Web cartoon. And, maybe it's where the GM and the coach wind up reporting up to the owner because that's what Dan Snyder's always done. To believe he'd change for any reason, got none. I think he does believe in Ron Rivera. I think he should believe in Ron Rivera. I think Ron Rivera is an outstanding coach and is going to do a lot of great things. So if Hurney winds up there, I don't think it's a particularly good hire. I don't really think Hurney's been a great GM. I think if you really look at his body of work after Dave Gettleman was fired in Carolina, Hurney kind of came in and sort of coasted, but never did anything major to help improve the Panthers and take them to the next level. If anything, under his stewardship, they got worse. So I don't see that as a good hire. There are guys out there, Louis Riddick is a popular name. I'd love to see him get an opportunity. I find him so entertaining on Monday Night Football. I love his insight, so I kind of hope he stays. Last thing I want to touch on before I sign off for the night, going into free agency, I think it's really interesting when you talk about free agency and dead money. And I mentioned this a while ago when talking about Doug Peterson and the Eagles. So the Philadelphia Eagles going into the offseason are something ridiculous like $70 million over the salary cap for 2021. Possibly higher depending upon how much the cap falls due to COVID and loss of ticket revenue and things like that. And what's funny is because of everything that's happened with Carson Wentz, is the popular thing is, well, they're going to trade Carson Wentz or they'll cut him. All right, first of all, they're not cutting Carson Wentz, and here's why. If they cut him, it's a $66 million hit against their cap. That's if they cut him prior to, or it's anywhere between $54 million and $66 million, depending upon what numbers you want to believe. So hear me out, folks. $54 million to $66 million. Do you think any owner or GM in their right mind is going to have that type of money on their balance sheet for no production? And oh, by the way, they still have to write him a check for some of that money. Now, if they trade him, the cap hits only $34 million. If they keep him, it's a cap hit of $34.8 million. So if they can find a trade partner who's willing to take on his contract, which I think is a terrible move because, quite frankly, Wentz has not been the same since he had those early injuries, and Wentz didn't win anything in Philadelphia. Nick Foles won that Super Bowl. Nick Foles helped him in the playoffs a year later. So Carson Wentz hasn't really done anything. So don't believe that Carson Wentz is really worth taking on that contract. Now, but I will say this, coaches are arrogant. They believe in their systems. Could I see a guy like Bill Belichick bringing in a Carson Wentz? Yeah. Could I see Belichick taking on that salary cap money? No. But the Patriots are going to have some cap money, so maybe they will. Don't know. They might. The other thing that's really interesting is you have Carson Wentz, whether he's traded or cut, he's this massive cap hit, right? Anywhere between $34 million and $66 million looking at the trade or looking at the cut route. Then you have the 49ers who have a large contract with Jimmy Garoppolo. He's in year 4 of 5. And if they want to get rid of Garoppolo, it's a measly $2.8 million against their cap. I'd do that in a heartbeat and start afresh. But here's the problem if you're the 49ers. You can get rid of Jimmy G, but who are you replacing him with? Now, they did pick up Josh Rosen late in the season, signed him off another team's practice squad. He was a first-round pick in 2018, so they got a shot with him. But is that who they want to hitch their wagon to? Is there a free agent quarterback that's out there that they feel like they can get? Is there a different quarterback they can get in a trade? Heck, does Kyle Shanahan think he can manage Carson Wentz? And for the trade partner of the Eagles, if they do manage to find someone, it's a reasonable contract to take on for a quarterback, but in my opinion, it's not a reasonable contract for a guy who produces like Carson Wentz, who has physically had injuries, and quite frankly, the way he played this year, I think a lot's in his head. I think a lot of his issues are right in his head, and it's going to be really fascinating to see what happens with Carson Wentz with the Eagles. To me, I think they hit the reset button. I think you'll hear that there's going to be an open competition in camp. They're going to keep Wentz because they kind of have to. You're not going to, maybe they'll trade, if they can find a trade partner and get some decent compensation, sure. Maybe they draft a quarterback with the 6th overall pick in the draft. That's possible. And then maybe do you really want to have Carson Wentz, a guy you drafted in 2016, Jalen Hurts, the guy you drafted with the 2nd overall pick this year, or the 2nd round pick this year, and then another 1st round quarterback? Maybe. It worked for the Dallas Cowboys in '89 and when they had Steve Walsh and then drafted Troy Aikman, but do you want to invest that much in your quarterback position for an unknown? You don't know what's going to happen. So it's going to be exciting. I love the offseason. That's, the first day of free agency is always my favorite NFL offseason day, but today's always my favorite and not because I'm excited that people are losing their jobs, but it is exciting to see what's going to happen. What are the possibilities? Who's out there? And it's just kind of nice when your teams are competitive enough or in a coaching situation where you don't think they need to make, I'm not a fan of John Harbaugh, the person, but I do need to do this because in my first incarnations of the Word of Josh, I was a John Harbaugh hater. Not in terms of, I never thought he was an effective coach. I was ready for them to move on. And I always said this man, he doesn't evolve. He's too stubborn. And I'll give him a lot of credit because he did evolve mid of 2018, recognized Joe Flacco wasn't working, saw some talent in Lamar Jackson, encouraged his team to adjust their offense to fit the quarterback and fit the player. Too often over the history of the NFL, you've seen teams try to fit a player into their scheme. The Atlanta Falcons did that with Michael Vick for years. They tried to make him a West Coast offense quarterback rather than really tweaking their offense to fit around what Michael Vick did well. Whereas I think the Ravens have done that with Lamar Jackson. I think the Chiefs have definitely done that with Patrick Mahomes. And I think you're going to see whoever gets the Houston Texans job, I think you're going to see them really develop an offense that's going to make Deshaun Jackson even greater than he already is, because I think he's one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. And it's too bad for him that the early part of his career, he was on a team with such an incompetent head coach who's so brilliant, they made him the GM. And in his first act as GM, he traded DeAndre Hopkins for David Johnson straight up. Did David Johnson do anything this year? Anyway, all right. Thanks for joining me for the first ever Monday Night Josh. I hope you enjoyed. I really appreciate you tuning me in. We're going to get this podcast loaded back up so you can listen to it on your smartphone or tablet, anything that you like to drive to, listen to and drive with. But this is the first ever Monday Night Live. Appreciate you turning into the Word of Josh, and I will see you soon. Bye-bye.